Hey, Topping Eli's Math Industry, and we're going to understand what standard form is and how to turn it into a y equals mx plus b equation and to find the x and y intercepts. So, a standard form is sort of like a jumbled mess with y equals mx plus b because the y is not isolated. You just have this random equation. So what we're going to be doing first is to change that to get y isolated. We can do that by doing some simple algebra. So let's circle the y because that means the object or number that you don't want to touch because you want it alone. So to get y alone, we gotta move all this to the other side where 20 is. So we're gonna subtract that side by 7x and subtract that side by 7x. So we can get negative 5y is going to equal 20 minus 7x. So basically, we just did a step so we can get y isolated further. The next step is to simplify again and get that y alone, because at negative 5, it's not supposed to be there. So we're going to divide everything that we have by negative 5, because since negative 5y is the same as negative 5 multiplied by y, we're going to divide it so we can do the opposite. So, negative 5 divided by negative 5 is going to cancel out. So we got y alone. It's going to equal 20 divided by negative 5. That is negative 4. And negative 7x divided by negative 5. We're going to leave that as a fraction as positive 7 over 5x. When you have a negative divided by a negative, or a negative multiplied by a negative, it will become a positive number. So, we have y equals negative 4 plus 7 over 5x. But we can rearrange this equation because we wanted it in y equals mx plus b form, or slope-intercept form is another way you can name it. So, we're going to have y right here, because it's y equal. Mx is your slope and your variable. So your slope is 7, 5, and x is your variable. So y equals positive 7 over 5x minus that by 4. That minus that by 4 is represented as the letter b, or your y-intercept. But what is the y-intercept? The next thing that we're going to be learning about is what the x and y intercept is and how to find them in the standard form. We have learned what standard form is and how to turn that into y equals mx plus b. But what is the x-intercept and the y-intercept? We're going to be making a graph and we'll be able to understand that. So here is a graph. If you ever learned in your science classes about independent and dependent variable, that represents the y and the x variable. So the horizontal line that's flat on the ground is going to become your x-axis. That is an independent variable, something that's always changing, because you can insert anything in for x and your y is going to depend on whatever you put on for x. Your y variable is called your dependent variable, and that's the line pointing right towards the sky. That's going up and down. So y and x-axis are actually the lines to make up a graph. But why do we learn this? We learn this because we can find the y and x intercepts of what they are in a standard form without having to put them into slope-intercept form. So, what are intercepts in the first place? An intercept is actually where the y and the x strike through a line. So, the y-axis, the y-intercept, is going to be on the y-axis. And it also means that a slope or line is going to strike through that part of the y-axis. The x-intercept is pretty much the same thing because it strikes through where the x-axis is. That's where the slope or line strikes through the x-intercept. Normally, the y-intercept is actually where the slope begins because from the last equation, -4, y equals 7 over 5, x minus 4, that means that that slope is going to start at -4 on a graph. Learning the basic knowledge of what a y and x-intercept is, now we can find what they are in the standard form. So there is actually a pattern that we're going to be looking at, is that every y-intercept always has a point that has 0 because that's the x. The first variable represents the x, and the last one represents the y. So y-intercepts will always have an x of 0 and y as a number. So it goes up or down. So 0 because of x, and y goes up or down. If you want to take a look at the x-intercept, an x-intercept point will always have a number but never rise or go down. So pretty much you're going to have a number as x and 0 as y. That represents that the x-intercept is going to go left or right horizontally. So here's the challenge. Find the x-intercept of 7x minus 5y equals 20. So remember, the x-intercept will always have a 0 in the y. So what we can do is, you see that y, we're going to insert a 0 in that y because that tells us that the x-intercept will never have any other number but 0 in the y. So -5 multiplied by 0 will stay 0. So now we find what x is between 7x and 20. So when we try and isolate x, because we're trying to find the x-intercept, then we're going to have to divide that side by 7 and divide this side by 7 because we're trying to find what x is alone. So when you do that, x is going to stay as a fraction as equal to 20 over 7. So the point that we find for the x-intercept, the x-intercept is going to be 20 over 7, comma, 0, because it has a number as the x and a 0 as the y. Now let's try and find the y-intercept of 7x minus -5y equals 20. So remember, the y-intercept must have an x of 0 and any other number as y. So since we're looking for the y-intercept, what we're trying to isolate is the y variable. So we're going to insert x as 0 because y-intercepts must have 0 as x in their points. So 7 multiplied by 0 is 0. So now we have -5y equals 20. And when we want to isolate y, we divide by -5 and divide this side by -5 to simplify. And y is going to equal 20, divide that by -5, a positive divided by a negative will become a negative. So that's going to be -4. So the y-intercept in this case scenario is not -4. It's 0, -4. And we can also understand that because -4 was actually the y-intercept we got in a y equals mx plus b form. So we can understand that we got that one correct. Let's see the y-intercept and the x-intercept on a graph. We did it. We have successfully learned how to put the standard form into a slope-intercept form, and we are also able to find the y-intercept and the x-intercept of a standard form equation without graphing or having to put it into y equals mx plus b form. I hope this video has helped you. Thank you for watching Talpingerlife's Math Industry. Like and subscribe!